You are listening to WKCR 89.9 FM New York. This is a show, amazing conversation with Jerry Kisslinger. He's one of the founders of the Zlatne Uste brass band, which also makes him one of the founders of the incredible Golden Fest, one of the best music festivals in New York City. 50 bands, celebration of Balkan music. It's all happening in different rooms, everything from polyphonic singing to just burning brass bands and klezmer groups. I hope you'll check it out. And here is our conversation with Jerry Kisslinger of the band Pontic, Firebird, and Zlatne Uste. You sent me this really burning track from the Pontic Firebird group.
Right.
Set it up for us, yeah.
Sure. So thanks for sharing it. Pontic Firebird plays Western Pontic music. So that's music from the Black Sea coast, from the Greek-speaking population that lived there for centuries and was forcibly relocated after the end of World War I and the formation of the Turkish state out of the Ottoman Empire, and resettled back into Greece. And we were playing a tune called Yetere. It's a fast, as you said, driving, burning 9/8. These are often played for a long time. You'll see that the melody is fairly repetitive. It's almost trance-like as people do these dances. And a lot of the Pontic repertoire just becomes a groove that transports the dancers. And so we're looking forward to playing this year also at the festival.
Sweet. Let's check it out. right. And you sent me this track from Zlatne Uste. This is, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Vronsky. How was that?
That's very good. I mean, we can try to get a soft N, Bransky, but
okay,
close enough for
Vronsky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me what are we hearing here?
Well, we talked in this conversation. We were talking a little bit about the Roma element within Serbian brass band music, and this is a great example of having learned this from a Vranja-based trumpeter and band leader, Demiran Čerimović, who's been very generous in sharing his knowledge with us. Also in 9/8, but listeners will be challenged to see the connection between this and Yetere, the other musical selection. It's a highly syncopated breakdown. If I can talk for a minute, I am a drummer, so it's 2-2-2-3. Both of them are, but this is syncopated in a two phrase pattern. And Vranski means it's from Vranja, which is a southern town in Serbia. That is really, that region is the capital of a lot of the Roma bands, the Romani bands that have really gained huge prominence both within their own communities and across Serbia and across the world for like the sort of surprising jazz-infused, syncopated, catchy, not only, I would say syncopations in the rhythm, arrangements, they're just going for it. And we'll play for hours at weddings. Čoček is a form of dance and music that, is more closely related to Turkish music than other styles in the Balkans, and can be either in a kind of square time, like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3. That's the most common form of Čoček, but this is also called the Čoček, this 9. And if I can, you can share this or as you like, but this is bum 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 bum. Okay, that's the basic feel. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. But they're doing boom boom bum. So you'll hear that in the middle horns, and you'll hear that in the drums. And it's just, we're so lucky to have been able to learn material like this from the masters who create it.
Yeah, let's take a listen. You're listening to NYC Radio Live. David Ellenbogen here. You're also tuned to WKCR. We're glad to have you. I'm with the great Jerry Kisslinger of Pontic Firebird fame, and also a original founding member of the Zlatne Uste. Sorry, it depends who you ask. Zlatne Uste. Incredible band, which are also the founders of Golden Fest, which is in its 39th year. I think it's my favorite festival, and I'm in the festival business. I love this festival. It's sometimes more. I guess this year it's 50 bands or 50 bands plus. Yeah, and just music from all around the Balkans, klezmer, just rare forms of amazing, opened my ears. That was the first time I ever heard kind of polyphonic singing live. So much beautiful music. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to chat a little bit.
Happy to do it.
Yeah. All right. So I have a million questions, but I guess we can go back to just the roots of the music of Zlatne Uste. So this is a Balkan brass band. Is it generally, like, how did this music come to be, and what kind of settings did it like tend to like appear in?
Well, I think there's two questions there. One is, how did it come to be in the Balkans, and how did it come to be in the United States?
Let's start with the Balkans.
Yeah. I mean, there are different theories about that, but basically, it came to be in part because there were two empires who pushed and pulled around the Balkans for a number of centuries, that had their military bands and their instruments that are made of brass. So there was the Ottoman Empire from the east and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they sort of met around Serbia and Croatia and that border region. And so, some of this involved people adapting their own regional musics to those instruments that came back with the military bands. So, and what the band plays is a family of rotary valve flugelhorns, and so they're not our standard Western trumpets. But I would say that the brass band music really became extremely popular in the Balkans in the last 50 years, replacing, for a lot of occasions, more traditional music such as the zurla and the tup on the zurla being this kind of very primitive, very raw sounding double reed instrument and a drum. And the trumpet kind of took the place of the zurla, and the drums are still there, but you have this family of middle brass and tuba filling it out. And, weddings, funerals, festivals, and I think the one that is best known, probably even to many of the listeners, it would be the festival in Guča, Serbia, which is this amazing gathering that has been going on. I don't know the exact how long, but and Zlatne Uste had been guests at that festival 5 times over the years, starting back in 1987. So for us, it was an incredible opportunity to witness, in person, bands that met us even at the airport and played us off the airplane.
Wow.
And then we didn't know, are we going to meet real bands? We had no live models. We were working from recordings. Many of us had traveled in the Balkans already with other and been with other kinds of musicians, but we hadn't seen a brass band work. And then we got to Guča in 87, After having, just very briefly to talk about the U.S. side, part of this grew out of these Balkan music and dance camps that are run by the East European Folklife Center. And in 1983, a number of us attended the camp that was up in Ashokan, not too far from you. And the came back and said, let's keep this thing going. And 4 of the people who were in the band at the time are still in the band, I think. And so that's 41 years ago, 42, almost 42 years ago. So in 87, you know, we went to Gucha, and Gucha at that time was not really the international phenomenon that it was. It was just coming out of Tito's Yugoslavia. Tito was still on the stage. And it hadn't been marketed, you know, in the same way that it has now, so that people come from all over the world now to go to Gucha as this big sort of blowout, you know, Mardi Gras. I've seen it called Mardi Gras of the Balkans or whatever. It was really almost entirely Serbs, and we were the first non-Serbian band to play Serbian music there. They'd had, you know, Swedish high school students playing their orchestral band music or whatever as interludes between the other bands, but we were coming and playing their music, and that was very meaningful at that time to people there, as well as to us, to be able to reflect that back. As far as its popularity, I mean, there are many Balkan brass bands in the United States now. I'm just talking about the U.S. side. Is that interesting to you? Or,
yeah.
And you know, part of that is the influence of there were a couple of movies that came out in the 80s. One called Underground, and one called Black Cat, White Cat, I think, by Emir Kusturica, with music by Goran Bregovic, and they also toured. Bregovic toured here, and so a lot of people got exposed to this music. And you know, there is a wider brass band scene in the United States now that's much bigger than it used to be, and some part of that got drawn to the Balkan music flavor of that. Sometimes crossing over into a kind of caricatured zaniness, which was played up in some of those films, and which is not really the core of what we do as a band. We're really playing traditional and contemporary dance music, and not trying to be, you know, wackier or crazier or zanier or anything like that. However, I will say at the Golden Festival, you will see a pretty good share of exuberant, no holds barred, over the top partying. So I don't mean to say there isn't that as well.
Yeah. So from my understanding, I've been reading a book that you'll probably, as knowing you'd probably eat it up as well. It's called "And the Roots of Rhythm Remain" by Joe Boyd, and he did a lot of music, including being the first to record, I think, Ivo Popovic for alongside Pink Floyd, and other people like that for the first time. And a lot of the theme of the book is just all these kind of unexpected connections, and also, you know, how the governments traditionally tried to do their best to keep their music so-called, you know, pure. So they would be eliminating any Roma lyrics, or even Ivo Popovic, he had a Roma name, he was Roma, you know, or they would be trying to keep certain rhythms out of the styles of music, and they would always be outvoted by people's feet, because at the dance floor, if you dropped a burning Turkish rhythm, it didn't matter, you know, and everybody had a few drinks in them, they would forget their nationalism if they weren't Turkish necessarily and dance to it. So I'm curious what kind of, you know, ingredients you've come across of, rhythms or melodies that have kind of like jumped borders or jumped ethnic groups and kind of made up the style that you're kind of an expert in?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, in what I described about Kusturica, Joe Boyd definitely played a role. Ivo Papazov did a couple of tours in the United States, including a big concert in Central Park that kind of blew everybody's mind. It's a little bit different style of music than what we play. This is Bulgarian wedding style. But also, the Bulgarian band recording of the Mistoa de Voix Bulgarique or whatever that became the Bulgarian choral, arranged choral music also, started to draw people's attention to the music of the area. So, and Joe had brought a wonderful trio of singers in the 80s, and I had a chance to meet him then, and really grateful for his contribution in this. To your question, I mean, the dynamics that you highlighted were very acute in Bulgaria, especially. I'm aware of, the outlawing of for a period of time under the old regime of not only people's last names sounding too Turkish, as you mentioned, but certain rhythms, certain instruments, so that even the zurla, which I mentioned before, which is associated more with Roma and with Turkish culture, and not at that time considered kosher Bulgarian, was outlawed for a time at the folk festival, whereas it's one of the prides of the richness of the music in the area, and has those tensions are no longer, those prohibitions are no longer in place in the same way. There were rhythms, the various forms of Q-check or Cho-check rhythms that were an issue. The music that, I mean, I play music that in a number of different bands, and with Zlatne Uste, the repertoire really does represent both straight ahead village dance music. We play kolo, which is the core repertoire for a Serbian traditional dance, whether it's in 2/4, and people love to dance kolo all over the Balkans, but particularly in Serbia and Croatia, this is like a very Slavic marked thing, but other people dance it too. But a lot of the repertoire and a lot of the hotter repertoire and the like grabbier repertoire and the wedding band stuff and all that is very much learned. We've learned directly from Roma bands in Serbia and Macedonia, and the styling of that in terms of how to ornament melody, in terms of, it's not just the melodies themselves and the makam, the modes that these are in, or the styles of soloing, but actually the way you make melody on the instrument. So the ornamentation, the mentality that goes into what a performance is. Much of what we play with Zlatne Uste is from the Roma side of things, and we've seen some of those tensions play out at times. Say at the competitions among the brass bands in Serbia and Romania and Serbia, but I don't want to like dwell on that because I will say that the Golden Festival, which is our main topic here, I think, is the antidote to the politicization of music. It's a place where, because we have many musicians who, like me, are Americans who came to this but have devoted years of our lives to it. But we also have many musicians who are among the mainstays, the foundational musical anchors of their own ethnic communities in the United States. They often play within those communities, and yet they come and play for free to other people outside of those communities as well. It's really an opportunity to showcase and express their own cultures. And so I guess I'm saying this because the borders that divide the nations of the Balkans For example, the border between Turkey and Bulgaria, it's like 100 years old, a little over 100 years old. The music has always flowed across those borders, as have people. I can recommend the book Border by Kapka Kasavova, if you're not aware of that one. That does such a great job of illuminating how borders interrupt lives and interrupt cultures and interrupt, but that people find ways to get around it. The other band I mentioned, Pontic Firebird, and I'm playing also with another Pontic Greek musician named Dimitris Stefanidis and another one named Christos Tiktapanidis. So there are three Pontic Greek bands. That's music that came from the Pontos, the Black Sea coast, among the Greek-speaking populations that were removed and driven out, and there was a lot of violence, ethnic violence, in the wake of World War I, and the Balkan Wars of World War I, and the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, and a lot of population was moved to Turkey out of the Balkans, and a lot of Christian population was moved out of, and Greek-speaking population was moved out of that area and settled back in Greece. And so that music has so much more in common with Turkish music, Armenian music, Black Sea music, than it does with some of the other, what we might think of as Greek music, classic Greek music, that it surprises a lot of listeners. The language is different and so on. So, the history is inherently transnational. People have moved, people have been relocated, or people have migrated, and the repertoires reflect that. It's a long answer. You want a short one?
No. It's a long history, and there's so many different angles, and I do appreciate how you brought it back to kind of one of the things that's so amazing about Golden Festival. Someone said to me, like, you'll probably have more people speaking different languages next to each other in the same room there than just about anywhere else. It's unbelievable. And once I guess, for a while you were at this classic venue in Brooklyn, and someone told me that the proprietor, who you probably know better, I only heard this secondhand story, but he said he saw these people in their original garb, and he was looking at these people and wearing robes and whatever tradition. And he said, these people, are they educated? And the guy said, we probably have more PhDs in ethnomusicology here than, anywhere else in the world. But to him, they looked like they were from the old country, sheep herders or something like that. Yeah, it's an incredible thing to create a space where music can just be just do its thing and just be music and experience these crazy I don't know, for me to like, if I were to hear some of these recordings, I wouldn't know a way in but when you see the dance, which I guess you could maybe talk about it, you can't separate the dance and the music, can you?
So I'll be happy to speak to that. It's sort of what I devote my entire musical and music teaching life to, is exactly that connection between music and dance, and specifically in the South Slavic and Western South Slavic, like Macedonian, Albanian, Southern Serbian. It's so intimate, the connection, so that when people come and want to learn how to play the drums, which is what I teach, I'm like, learn the dances if you're going to play for dancing. First of all, it's absolutely, and there's a logic in the steps and in the pulse that has nothing to do with the numerical approximation that an academy trained, the kind of person that Mr. Halkias thought he might see coming to this, not in costume, those PhDs. But it's not about meter; it's about these dance rhythms. And to give a really radical example of that, there are dances in that I play in the right setting with the right lead player and the right dancer. And if you're in the middle of the floor, not up on a stage cut off by lights and sound system, where I am absolutely anchoring the downbeat to the step of the dancer. And the dancer is anchoring his step or her step to the downbeat. And the lead player is in that dialogue too. And so the three of us are determining a phrase that's completely outside of a precise metrical thing. And it's not individually improvised. It's expressed as a dialogue or a trialogue between those three voices. And it opens up a dance space that exists. I know there are other cultures that have it, and I'm not so versed in them, but this is what has drawn me to this music. So there might be a dance that you might measure as being in 11, slow, click, 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 click. Okay, it's 3, 2, 2, 2, 2. But the number is really less important than how that's grouped or phrased, which is totally related to the steps. So, one of the things when I'm happiest at Golden Festival is when we're in the middle of the floor playing right to a line of dancers who know where to step. One of the other things I'll say that's been remarkable over the many years of the festival is at the beginning, a lot of the people who came knew the steps from workshops and had learned in this sort of folk dance world. And then when we moved to Brooklyn, especially, not just then, but especially when we moved to Grand Prospect Hall, which you referred to before, it blew up, and we had thousands of people coming, many of whom had never been to a dance workshop or would never come to a dance workshop. And at first it was just big party. And then over time, just like in the Village, they started to learn a lot of these steps. And so I played to a room of 1,000 people who've never been to a Pontic dance workshop, but they were doing the dances, they were finding their own way into it. And that's incredibly moving for those of us who are so devoted to kind of saving this DNA of the rhythms and the feel of these dances. I did want to speak a little bit to what you said about the common ground aspect of it, like the many languages. We're delighted to be in Queens, which is, Brooklyn's no slouch in this area either, but Queens is an incredibly multicultural, international, I don't even want to say national because nation is in there, but
cosmopolitan.
How many languages are in Queens? That's the heart of it in terms of where New York is now, and so it's a kind of only in New York situation now, I think, at Golden Festival. Also, the other diversity there is between ages, and you really, in this country, to have a party, and it really does feel like a party. One person told us, he said it felt like the best wedding he'd ever crashed. That's what it feels like. It's like, whose wedding is this? But there are 1-year-olds there and 90-year-olds there, and people are partying together. And that we don't have that many social settings in this country that mix generations that way. They did in the Village. They did, we might at certain weddings or whatever, but so that's part of the mix. And then the mix across even the performing groups, some of whom are at the top of their fields within their own communities and their own styles of music, like really internationally known stars in that. And some are, just doing it for pleasure and passion. And some of them we've had, teenagers from these communities who know all the moves, but don't necessarily know all the notes yet. But, so there's a range of backgrounds too, in terms of music. The other thing I wanted to mention is that over the years, there's been a real development in what we call the Charshia marketplace. So we have a colleague named Batya Bell who does an amazing job of recruiting artisans to come and bring just incredibly beautiful, handcrafted goods of various kinds, arts and crafts of various kinds. When I mean arts and crafts, I mean arts and crafted items for sale. And they're there talking with people. And it over time broadened the sense of immersion and introduction to the richness of these cultures, that it's brought by people who are dealing with the material culture as well. It's really a nice aspect of the festival, and has connected us in wonderful ways to people within the various communities.
Yeah, I was thinking about some of the mind expanding elements. One is that, for those of us trained in Western approaches, like you're saying, we want to break everything down to a grid or something like that. But here you have something, a musical form that's co-created in real time based on physical movements. There's also another grid, which is our piano equal tempered grid. And you've got all these vocalists particularly, but I'm sure the horn players as well, and everybody else they all have their own unique scales, which is really something that people rarely get exposed to. But at this festival, you're hearing these choirs singing these incredibly close harmonies. Do you have any kind of theories about like what effects these have on listeners? Have you thought much about that, or or I don't know, if you take it in whatever direction you want, but I'm sure you've given some thought to all these various maqams and modes and harmonies, and that this festival is helping kind of preserve and amplify.
I'm happy that this festival showcases music that opens up people's ears. I wouldn't want to overemphasize our role in preserving it. I mean, what's showcased there is drawing on very deep and rich and vibrant traditions from places all over the world that are still very much alive. So it's not, it's not a museum. It's an opportunity. And so I just want to be a little bit humble about that. I'm glad we can bring it to new audiences, but I don't want to overstate. I don't want to overstate our role in that. But I of course hope that it will expand people's understanding of what a melody could be, or so on and so on. In terms of, I know, it's absolutely true that the way technology developed in Western music, it narrowed down the musical possibilities by tempering, by fretting, by, and so part of what's delightful and surprising in some of the music that people will hear are not only the harmonic intervals that you mentioned, but also just simply the number of notes that people find within an octave, or the ways of expressing a melody that will have a different intonation going up the scale than it does going down the scale. And this is all related to maqam, as you mentioned, and the idea of these modes. I'm not an expert in that. I'm mainly a drummer, so I'm not going to speak too much about it. But I will say, I know that theoretically, at least, in some of these modes, there are 9 degrees between, rather than 2. I mean, we have a half step between our 2 notes on a piano. There are 9 degrees in some of these traditions, in classical maqam. And so the ear training that's involved in that, and of course, it also means that you can't play it on certain instruments, or you learn to adapt them. So, I mean, violins can do it, voices could do it, trumpets could do it, but fretted instruments can't do it unless you bend crazy. Keyboard players learn to use benders to get in between those notes. But yeah, it's an important thing that wakes people up to a richer vocabulary for what music can be, for sure. And but we're lucky to be in New York City. I mean, I would just say there are numerous opportunities to hear this kind of music around New York City, including there's Macam New York and other organizations that are really devoted to teaching Macam to others.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Brooklyn Macam has a regular session, which is amazing. And
right. I mean,
there's
a rich Arabic music tradition in the city, and Turkish Macam also represented by Macam New York as well. Yeah.
Cool. So the way this is set up, talking about like participating, is you have your Friday night, and it's Friday night the
17th.
Friday night the 17th of January. People can come for the first night, and that's more of like kind of learning the dances, and that is that more of an opportunity to kind of like get a little more instruction if someone wants to go full-fledged, or how do you think about these? It's a 2-night festival.
Yeah, I mean, Friday night is more dance focused. There's dance instruction, dance workshops, and 5 great dance bands. It's in one room, and it's a little less crowded typically, so there's actually more room to dance. Sometimes things get if you've been to Grand Prospect Hall, sometimes things get a little wacky in the middle of the floor, and the floor there is not so much in the new venue. The floor would tend to oscillate with the steps
above your head too. That is, no one will ever forget a huge chandelier waving like that. We got lucky with that.
Yeah, we all feel fortunate to have come through the waves of that chandelier. So Friday night is dance focused. But it's wonderful listening music too. It's just smaller scale in terms of the number of bands that are playing. Friday and then Saturday is full bore. I mean, we have 4 or now maybe 5 performance stages and jamming opportunities for musicians. And one room is mostly for listening. There's actually going to be a kafana, a coffee house setting that's just more informal with quiet music as well. And then we have, a 4-ring circus going on in terms of a variety of music going on at all times in 4 rooms for listening and dancing. And so that's sort of the biggest display of the variety that we've been talking about will be on Saturday night. But Friday night's a great way to get your feet going and ease into the festival. So it just depends on what people are hungry for.
Yeah, cool. And I know you brought some music. This is Zlatne Uste playing a kolo. So yeah, maybe you could tell me a little about this performance and song.
Well, first of all, you're doing a great job in learning to pronounce the name of the band. I want to congratulate you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
That's sounding really good now. So it's this, your listeners will hear it's in a very approachable 2/4 offbeat kind of feel. This is kolo. Kolo is widely popular across all the communities in Serbia, in Croatia, across many of the Balkan countries, and is one of the places where traditional melodies that were played on other instruments before the brass got so popular have been transferred directly over into the brass repertoire. And, it feels like village music in a different way. And so, this is a medley of a couple of kolos, and, it's just characterized by a strong offbeat feel and very approachable, embracing melodies.
All right, let's check it out.
we tend to think in these categories like Jewish music, not Jewish music, or Romanian or Serbian or this or that.
Right.
But the musicians don't necessarily think that way. And I mean, they might in some cases and might not in others where there's shared tunes. I think you were asking me about this earlier, shared material, shared approaches. You know, very often there's more in common across these categories than almost anyone understands until you really dig deep into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, like, it's a fascinating, like, lens into the world and into history. You know, you start seeing things that aren't in anybody's interest to bring up necessarily, you know, so it's just very interesting. Like, you know, I don't know. Yeah, it always keeps like opening my eyes about you know, just bizarre things of the West, you know, banning drums for 1,000 years. You know, the Pope using the Visigoths and telling them to eliminate the drums, and then, you know, or just, you know, we don't real things like I was reading that your Pontic music, kind of the epics go back to the Byzantine era, and, you know, I guess, you know, we how really Central Asia was really the center of the world, and, you know, we don't really think of it that way, at least over here, but that was you know.
You know, David, you said it's not in anyone's interest to bring it up. I would actually say the opposite. I think it's in everyone's interest to bring it up. I think, you know, because what you realize is the artificiality of the categories and borders, either they're intellectual or physical, that are drawn that serve the interests of those who are enhancing their own power. And that, you know, the deeper you get in it, you see like the incredible depth of and richness of our shared human civilization.
Yeah.
Period. And you're absolutely right. I mean, right now I'm reading a book called The Case of Jem, which is all about 1481, and what happened in the split in the Ottoman rulers. But, you know, you see, you know, is this relevant to our time? It's hugely relevant because it's all about the preconceptions people had then about the West and the East, and where civilization lies, and people's prejudices against each other. And so, yeah, you know, I do believe that part of the significance of the festival that we put on is that it creates a space where we're able to see the best of people on an individual level and on a cultural level on display. Michael Ginsberg, who's leader of our band and program director for the festival, has said people come there and they're on their best behavior. It brings out the best in people. And I think it's absolutely true. It's just so, in that way, I think it's in everyone's interest to learn more about human connections and the power of music and dance to make those connections, despite the efforts of those who would use categories and boundaries, whether they're intellectual categories, scholarly categories, or political categories, for their own ends. I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, and onto the dance floor where it all
where it's really what it's for. Yeah. One aspect of why it feels so good to put this festival on every year is, you know, people throw around the word community a lot. I've never seen it more dramatically realized in terms of a community by choice than what this festival has built over almost 40 years. And that is represented by the feelings in the room that we've described, in the many rooms, but also, it is a tremendous volunteer effort. And you mentioned it before about volunteerism, but it's a tremendous volunteer effort. Literally, scores of people involved in making this happen. And last year, I really want to say the community took another form because we took a significant financial loss in putting on the festival. We never make money from it. It's always about putting it on the next year and being a benefit when we can be for organizations and doing work around Balkan cultures and relief work in the Balkans. But last year we lost a significant amount of money because of the rising costs of everything and the pandemic disruption. And we recovered that money within 2 months from our community.
You did a fundraiser?
We did a fundraiser and people stepped up immediately. Some people that we've known every year and some we don't really know so closely, but know what the festival is about. So, money's only one expression of this community, but I just want to say it's, the community feeds the festival as well as the festival feeding the community. And we saw that demonstrated so clearly this year. And we're just really grateful. And it speaks to the reality of the connection that's there. Money is only money, but there are a lot of things on people's minds right now and a lot of need in the world, and that people want this and people need it and they're choosing it. And they voted with, a very generous response when we expressed our need to put this on. Underlining that also is, musicians, even though it's a quiet time of year in January, these are musicians, whether they're from within the ethnic traditions by birth or by choice. These are people, what people will find when they come there, people who have put their heads down and delved deep and learned these traditions. Many of them could be performing somewhere else in January on a Saturday night, even in January. They've chosen to come and play for free. And they're chosen to do that not only to share with outsiders, but one thing is, to express connection to these deep sources of culture. And with a sense of humility, people have learned from masters. They want to share it out there. And I just think that the commitment and devotion of the performers that are there, also the artisans who come, and yes, it's a marketplace, but they're there to talk with people and share what they've made. There's a cultural context that comes from people's willingness to be present and represent their own cultures too, or the borrowed cultures, if you will. So I think that also speaks to a unique gathering of passion and genuine respect. You layer that below or above a great freaking party, and you have Golden Festival.